Alright, now that the mastering track is open, I do actually export every time and that I can, and master from a whole different track. Keep in mind, I have this muted over here so that I don't get like copyright flagged or anything by Machine Head. You'll notice that I have Span, which is my spectral analyzer, open on both of these. And the first thing I notice when I compare the two songs is that RMS over here is like -5, -4, -6 dB RMS. Insanely crushed, ridiculously loud. And when I do the same thing over here on my track, I'm already at like -17 dB RMS, and I've got so much headroom. I've got like 6 dB of peak headroom, and I've got a lot of places to go from here because I mixed it not so loud, which is great. So I start with, as always, Slate VTM, because this tape sound is, oh my goodness, so delicious. It just feels more fat and in your face, and I love it. It's so good. So from here, now that I've cranked the input a little bit, reduced the bass just ever so slightly because the bass was pushing a little too hard on the tape machine, and it felt like it was, consequently, almost felt like it was compressing a little bit when I was listening to it in headphones. So from there, I go to reduce the 40 hertz with Q3D, which is one of my favorite like mastering style EQs that has fixed bands. Only ever so slightly changing things. So cranking a little bit of air into the 20K band, increasing the sub by about as much as I'm cutting the 40 hertz, and you'll hear the difference it makes. It saturates and gets rid of some of the low end at the same time. So it feels fatter without being flubbier, and also feels a little bit brighter because I'm boosting in the 20 kilohertz band, and that brings a shelf across the whole song that, well, is shelfy and high-end, so it brightens it a little bit. I'm also monoizing so that the stuff on the left and right isn't too low-end, so that it's really concentrated on center, and I can get more loudness overall without destroying the psychoacoustics of it. Because you don't want a lot of flub around the sides, you just want enough to be felt. To me, it may not make a huge difference, but it does feel more psychoacoustically sound, because low end is omnidirectional. So unless you're centering it, then it can create a weird phasey imbalance in both sides. But it's not usually a problem, I just do it because I think it's best practice. So, from there, I do some multiband compression, and the difference it makes is huge in spite of the very little it's actually doing. So listen without, and with. Did that mix just come to life, or what? I'm doing some heavier compressing in the low end, but only to shave off little peaks so that there's not a lot of fighting in the low end. The mids I'm actually pushing up just to keep them more consistent. They only ever really compress to about 0.7 dB, so I pushed it up that much, basically making up gain for how much I've cut, and it keeps the mids consistent, which is a really hard thing to get right. Higher mids, I'm doing about the same thing. Highs, I do more, and then with the really highs, I actually kept it from getting too bright. During the sections with less high-end content, it brought that up, and during brighter sections, it cut it down a little bit, so it's never too bright. keeps the high end consistent through the whole song. Up next, I have Virtual Mix Rack, which is doing a decent amount of processing. This is a preset that I made called Your Mix Bus Called It Wants to Love Again. And yeah, you'll notice that it does exactly what it says. It wants to love again. So what it's actually doing is, it's running through VCC, which is like a console emulation. I'm trimming it back a little bit so that it doesn't overdrive any of this stuff too hard, and then cranking the drive on it so that it saturates like the consoles would. So it's going through a Brit 4K-E, which is like an SSL-E, and this is a USA, which is like an API kind of console. So I'm cranking the shimmer a little bit and the thickness just a tiny bit. Notice why I'm doing this. It creates sizzle, which is exactly what I want to hear from my cymbals. And from there, I'm also doing a little bit of parallel compression on the whole thing, literally no more than 10% on the whole bus, with the Monster, which is a dynamic processor that acts like an all buttons in kind of mode, sort of, from an 1176, but it's really intense, has a high pass filter for sidechaining, and high floor detection, which is kind of like on some LA2As, especially the modded ones, you can adjust how much high floor they detect and create more or less compression. It's kind of like a sidechain for the high end, so it's really cool. I highly recommend you try this out if you haven't. Sometimes it just does that extra little bit to get things pumping. Up next, I have a compressor on the whole mix, which is FG Red, Focusrite Red 3 emulation by Steven Slate. And it's, listen to how hard it's working. It's basically kissing the needle and staying at around 2 to 3 dB of gain reduction the whole time. Not super fast attack, but definitely super fast release. Ratio of 1.5 and threshold of negative 20 dB, so that it stays in that level pretty much the whole time, except during this section. So that it levels things out more, you know, gives it some of that good old drive and flubby go bye, because the high pass filter's at about 100 hertz, so everything over 100 hertz is getting compressed by this. Honestly, I'm making some room for the low end and keeping the song real tight, because that's what it calls for. Up next, I have one of my favorite limiters, which is the wall. I'm going to press the sanity check button so that you can see what it's doing. It's going to gain match the input and the output, and you'll just hear what it's doing to the song as a whole. It's honestly not doing a ton of damage, which I really like from a limiter. That's why that sanity check button is fantastic. So if I bypass the sanity check and crank it up, rip headphone users, I'm actually going to lower the volume that you guys hear so that you can hear what's going on. That's the volume level difference that you get without radically changing the mix, which is really cool. From that point, I also have K-Clip, which is doing exactly what it sounds like. It is clipping the mix. I have it set to crisp mode to cut about half a decibel of every transient, and every basically everything that goes into this comes out half a dB clipped. What this does is it increases the overall punch of the whole thing, and kind of gives it a fat smear like they used to do in the early 2000s. People would clip through really expensive converters, and it's no different right now. I'm clipping through this really inexpensive plugin that sounds like an expensive converter. That has the added bonus of doing this to our mix.
About that violence that he claims you have on that pop-up screen.
So that's literally how I mastered the whole thing. Another important thing to remember is that I have that little bumper at the beginning where it's got a fade in, and at the end it has a fade out so that it resolves peacefully. And there you go. That's the whole song. The mastering part didn't take me as long as the mixing part, but I wanted to get it to that same volume level and punchiness as a certain song by Machine Head. If you can see that, no need to share. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed yourselves. Maybe learned a thing or two about how I've been doing stuff. Honestly, leave comments, questions, suggestions in the comments section. Feel free to do whatever you want, like, comment, share, anything at all. I'm Phil Zio, and I'm exhausted because it is really late at night. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to give it a thumbs up. Talk to you next time. This is Phil Zio signing out.
This is true, it's rubbish, this is garbage. Another night of screaming at the screen. You scare them with these Trojans. What's a virtual IP blocker? None of this is real. This is why I have trust issues. Microsoft would never call about that.